Okay. Right, let's jump right in. So where do you remember these events? They all happened within the past 9 months. Can you believe it? These events cost hundreds and thousands of lives, and they damage billions of dollars of properties. Now imagine, what if it happens to us? How prepared are you to cope with the disaster when it's happening? Do you know how to escape to a safe place? Do you have insurance to cover your loss? And do you have a backup place to live while you're rebuilding a home? Now, what if I tell you there's even something more serious you need to be considering? Thank you for tuning in this morning. I'm Ken. I'm an architect, economist, and a real estate investor. Today's topic is climate proof your life. Now, climate change is happening, and I want to take this opportunity to share with you what kind of impact we're going to see from climate change, particularly in terms of how and where we're going to live. I hope this morning is going to inspire you to take climate issues into consideration when you're planning for your future. I came up with this acronym. It's called RAPIDO. It's rapid, it's urgent, it's something that we need to be considering. It involves recognize the situation, assess the risk, plan and implement your climate strategy, and keep your strategies diversified and open-ended. The first step is to recognize climate change objectively for what it is, assess the risks associated with climate change. So you ready? Let's dive in. Climate change refers to a changing system caused by human activities since the Industrial Revolution. Now, the climate system is dynamic and it's always changing, but here specifically, we're talking about the changes caused by human activities. Climate change is real. As you see in this map, the average temperature has already increased significantly since the 1950s, with the highest increase happening in the Arctic region. The increase of the temperature is caused by carbon dioxide emissions. Particularly, the emission accelerated after the Second World War as we are burning more fuels to generate more energy. This graph shows you the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere during the past 400,000 years. As you see, it's not static, it goes up and down, but it never exceeded 300 parts per million, which is a measurement that we will come back to, but it never exceeded 300 parts per million. Until now, currently, it's at over 400. This is very important information. We'll come back to this later when we talk about the risks. Climate change is complex. It can be really challenging to process all the information. Just look at all these terms. It's giving me a headache. And when we're overwhelmed, what we do as human beings, we shut down. So don't let climate change overwhelm you. It's important to simplify the issue and understand three simple factors. First, carbon emissions. Second, temperature. Third, sea level rise. Climate change is both a global issue and a local issue. The way we're going to experience climate change is going to be different and depends on where you live. Some living in lower latitude regions may experience more extreme heat, while others in higher latitude could see more floods. So it's going to be very different for everybody. Additionally, some countries are better positioned or better prepared for climate change. In general, wealthier countries have more resources and expertise to build better infrastructure, so they would likely to be better off even during climate change. For example, Japan started building the Tokyo metropolitan area underground discharge channel in the 1990s. It's now completed 15 years later. They spent over $2 billion on this project. The system It's like an underground cathedral in a way. 75 meters tall. They can pump 200 tons of water every second. So it's important for us to understand what kind of infrastructure projects they are or there will be to protect our cities, to protect our homes from climate disasters in the future. Now, have you ever been to a mountain, a canyon, or a waterfall? Do you feel astonished when you're in nature? In philosophy, these kind of feelings is considered sublime. It's about observing the nature that can create such a strong emotion for us. We flew to Canary Islands last year to watch the volcano eruptions. Some people travel to Antarctica to watch the melting ice cap. And Hollywood spends so much money and resources every year and make so many apocalyptic movies. And this is all because of Sublime. But there's a difference. Sublime, this fascination watching the nature has to happen in a safe place. But it's important for us to understand that we cannot watch climate change safely. We're not in this as an observer, we are in it together. That's why we need to take actions. Climate change also presented us with an agency problem. Now, agency problem is defined as conflict of interest in which one party, party A, is expected to act on party B's best interest. But in reality, party A could actually benefit more at the expense of party B. So put it in real term, what it means is that governments and corporations today, they have the authority to implement climate regulations, come up with plans for future generation. On the other hand, they are motivated to focus on short-term benefits, often at the expense of the interests of a future generation. So we collectively, we need to understand our responsibility for the future generation to avoid the agency problem. Climate change can also redistribute power and wealth. New ideas, new technologies are created every day to mitigate climate change, to mitigate the carbon emissions. Investing in these technologies could generate a lot of wealth. Some cities along the coast will suffer because of rising sea level, but others could flourish. So it's important for us to understand how climate change will reshape the world we know today. Now, based on all these recognitions, let's try to make an assessment. This is a very simplified version. There are a lot we can do to make a risk assessment, but let's focus on three things today: suitability, vulnerability, and readiness. Climate change will facilitate temperature increase and shift the weather pattern around the world. As we talked about earlier, different regions will experience climate change differently. But in general, higher latitude areas, such as Northern Europe, Russia, Canada, Northern US, or the southern part of Chile and Argentina, are going to be more suitable for human beings in the future. These maps show you in a few decades where will be a more ideal place to live. Just pure looking at climate, we are not taking other factors such as economic infrastructure into consideration yet. The left side, the darker the green, the more improvement you will see in a few decades because of climate change. On the right side, it reflects the changes from today the world is going to see. The circle is where Shanghai is where I am at the moment. Shanghai is going to be less desirable place to live, unfortunately, because of climate change. And let's look at the risk matrix. Horizontal, if you read it horizontally, there are 4 natural elements we consider. It's the water, air, fire, and earth. All the risks associated with different categories. Vertically, we have time and occurrence. So previously, we talk about how different places will have different risks. And this is a table showing you what kind of risk each place may have. And it's helpful for us to understand what types of climate risks to watch out for depending on where you live. And today we're going to focus on one thing. a water-related long-term risk, which is sea level rise. Storms and hurricanes are like roulette. Sea level rise is like gravity. Floods that are caused by storms happen randomly, but floods that's going to caused by sea level rise will stay. So this is a concept we have to remember carefully. So this chart, in fact, shows you that sea level has already been rising quickly since the 1900s. The pace is actually accelerating. It took us over 100 years to increase the sea level by a quarter of a meter. The latest scientific research believes that in the next 30 years, the sea level is going to rise by another quarter, and this is just the beginning. I remember we talked about carbon dioxide concentration. Now let's compare carbon dioxide concentration to the average temperature and sea level rise during the past 400,000 years. You see how closely these lines are moving together historically. The green line suddenly jumps after Industrial Revolution recently. So even if the carbon dioxide level stays at the same, we know that the increase in temperature and sea level would catch up. And even with net zero that we're talking about, we're still going to see the increase of carbon dioxide concentration until the point we get to 2050 net zero. And that's if we can get there. The atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration in 2020 was over 400 parts per million. And that is the level we haven't seen in a long time. The last time that there was such a high carbon dioxide concentration was in the mid-Pliocene period. That was 3 to 5 million years ago. Now let me ask you a question. We can do a poll. How high do you think the sea level was back then during the mid-Pliocene period? You see a poll, and I hope you take a guess. And try not to Google at the moment, but just guess how high the sea level was during that time when we had a similar carbon dioxide concentration. Right, let's see results coming in. See that some of you are quite optimistic. Right, we're going to wait for 10 more seconds. So if you want to input your answer, you're welcome to. It's great. I'm going to end the poll now. Can you see the results? So we have 23 answers. Some of you think that it's 10 meters. Some of you 15, 20, and 25. The answer is that during the mid-Pliocene warming period, the sea level was at least 25 meters higher than the current level. And that's the time when we have a similar carbon concentration in the atmosphere. And right now, the concentration is still increasing. Let me go back to my slide.
May I ask what's the current sea level, high level?
The current sea level, well, I think for a lot of measurements, we're talking about pre-industrial age. That's set at 0. And we have already increased by half, a quarter of a meter. And this slide, what I'm coming to now may help to answer your question as well, Jimmy. when we go back, even further back to Cambrian period, which is 500 million years ago, we can see that the sea level has changed a lot. It can go up and down by 500 meters. That's the height of the second tallest building in Shanghai for your reference. So what you see now on the right side of this chart is that currently the sea level historically actually has been higher than what we have now. During the last ice age, the sea level was probably, I think, 60 meters below where we are. But definitely when you look at this chart, it shows us that, the sea level fluctuates a lot and we are now at a historical low time. But here, when we're looking at the carbon dioxide concentration, we're not talking about, we're talking about 25 meters higher, and the average temperature is 3 degrees higher than pre-industrial age. And that is a number that a lot of scientists will refer to. We know that the sea level rise will completely reshape our coastline, and it's particularly important for us who live in coastal cities to pay attention to the risk. 25 meters means that all of some of the greatest cities we ever know, New York, Shanghai, London, would all be underwater. But luckily, we're not going to experience the 25-meter increase in our lifetime. The scientific models are now projecting a quarter-of-meter rise in the next 30 years. These models, however, are constantly changing, and sea level rise is accelerating. We are still discovering how quickly it will rise. But even with a smaller increase, in the next 2 to 3 decades, many coastal cities will be constantly flooded during a high tide. Some large cities in Asia are particularly vulnerable. And if nothing is done to protect the urban area, we're going to see constant floods in cities like Shanghai and Bangkok. So imagine it's 2050 and you live in a big coastal city and there's a hurricane, so much water comes in, it first floods the subway system, and you look out from your window, you notice everywhere is underwater and you wonder, what can you possibly do? This brings us to our third assessment. There are 2 groups of climate strategies. Mitigation focuses on reducing greenhouse gases emissions. And we have been hearing about net zero by 2050. That's mitigation. Adaptation is about finding ways to manage the risk and to live with climate change. Now, everyone, while it's encouraged to pursue a more sustainable lifestyle, it's important for us as individuals to understand what kind of protection and infrastructure a city is building that can protect our lives and properties. A robust adaptation strategy can reduce the risk that we talk about and make a city continue to be habitable. Additionally, with what we talk about today, I hope we could be in a better position to come up with a personal plan. So let's look at planning and implementing a diversified and open-ended climate strategy. This simple diagram highlighted 3 segments that's important to me: how I live, how I work, and how I invest. It's going to be different for you, so it'd be great if you come up with your own diagram. Lifespan nowadays will be close to 90 years. That means for me, I will probably live another 4 to 5 decades. So it's very possible for me to experience high tide, regular floods if I continue to live in Shanghai. And climate, I know, as we know, is going to be less desirable in Shanghai. I have to ask myself this. In terms of living, I need to be aware that where I live now may not be where I would enjoy living in the future. So do I want a second home? Where will it be? Or do I want to consider seasonal migration? In terms of work, should I spend my career focusing on climate change, finding climate change solutions? Can I work flexibly and take my work somewhere else? if I need to relocate when there's climate change, when there's climate events. Is my primary residence my main asset, and how the value of the property would be affected by climate change? Do I have insurance? And what would happen to it? What would happen to it when I had to reassess the value because of climate change? What about your investment portfolios? Are you investing in ESGs, focused companies? Do you understand the underlying risks associated with your investment? So there's just a lot of things to consider in this picture. Now, there are 4 things that we could all focus on. First, we need to place our eggs in different baskets. Diversification is important, including location. Second, we may need to understand that we need to move around, either permanently or seasonally. But that could also mean it could create new opportunities for us to discover new places and new friends if it is planned well. Third is keep our options open. Planning for climate change is a reiterative process. There's no one single goal. You have to always come back and to revisit the ideas. Fourth thing is everyone will have a different strategy that works best for you. So we cover a lot of materials already today, and I'm going to conclude this presentation with something positive. We have dealt with another climate crisis previously. In the 1970s, we discovered that there's a hole in the ozone layer. The ozone layer filters the UV light, which protect ourselves. Without it, we're likely to develop skin cancers. The ozone layer was depleting because of a material used in our air conditioning and refrigerator machines. All countries came together in Montreal and decided to phase out that element. And it would take us almost a century to fix the issue from the time we discovered. But we are making progress. The ozone layer is healing. Now, climate change is more complicated than that. We are not moving as quickly as we can to mitigate. But if we prepare and adapt, climate change may not be as scary as we think. And I hope that my presentation today would encourage you to start thinking about climate change when you make your plan. And I hope you find this helpful. And thank you. And I'm open to any questions you may have.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ken. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, good. Now, guys, this is your chance. Unmute yourself or use the chat group to ask any question to Ken. And I would like to ask yourself first while the others are thinking. So what is your personal strategy?
Well, thanks for having me, Janine. You know, the strategy I have, as I said, is to sort of recognize objectively the problems are, what the problems are. And for us, especially for us living in coastal cities, I think it's important to realize that it is happening, it is accelerating. And if we are, you know, in our mid-career, in our 30s, 40s, we're gonna live for another 30, 40 years or even more. That means we can experience the real impact of climate change. And that's why we need to start planning early. That's the first step. And it's going to be, I think it's going to require us to think flexibly, because the system is continuously changing. So it's very important for us to plan for a flexible future.
Who has any questions? Jimmy, please ask your question to Ken, and then Yannick. Jay and Jay.
Yeah, I have a small question. In terms of the climate change, do we have any statistics to show the last 3 years change trend since the COVID-19?
Yeah.
significantly reduce the human activities, it seems to me it will have, the climate change pace has been alleviated or still accelerated. And in what way?
Yeah.
Is that positive or negative?
Well, thank you, Jamie. That's a really helpful question. In 2020, because of COVID, because of the lockdown globally, the carbon dioxide emission actually decreased from the previous year, from 2019. So that means if we don't do anything, the carbon emission can be reduced. So that's on the carbon level. In terms of temperature-wise, it didn't have a significant impact yet, because when you look at the total carbon concentration in the atmosphere, it didn't reduce that much. We're actually still increasing the carbon concentration in the atmosphere. In terms of the annual emissions, we have already picked up in 2021 and 22. So we are still increasing the concentration of carbon in the atmosphere.
Okay, thank you.
Janke,
All right,
it's your
I have a
turn.
few questions. So one is, okay, you talked about being flexible in the future regarding everything, right?
Mhm.
But being flexible is a very broad term. For
Yeah.
example, what exactly, okay, let's go back to how people think and how people need to organize themselves. All right,
Yeah.
we live in a world where we get checklists and we get images. Understand, people need to know, I need to do this and this and this and this and this, even though it's not specific to climate change. But I think if you really want to help people to understand the effect of this and the broader influence it's going to have, we kind of need to build something to make it easy for people to understand.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that a checklist would be hard, but what are things we need to look out for? What can we do now to help? Like apart from the basic reuse, reduce, recycle, and those type of things, because this is going to be way bigger than just that.
Yeah.
For example, I think in China it's difficult because there's so many people, and how would that influence as well? So for example, yeah, so that is one thing I'm thinking of. Like I'm from South Africa, we still have space to move around and stuff like that, but in China, it's less so.
Yeah. So I think, when it comes to climate strategies, there are two things: mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation is about reducing your carbon footprint, either at a country level or personal level. Adaptation is something that we could have more control of, in a way, in my opinion. It's about living with climate change. In China, particularly, I think the first step is to really build awareness. A lot of people are not really aware of this issue, the urgency of this issue. Yeah, when you look at the economic activities, when you look at the where people are living in China, a lot of them are living in coastal cities, which will suffer a lot if the sea level rises. But in a country where geographically it's bigger, they do have the flexibility to move around, because when you look at one thing that we have to answer collectively is that we know that climate is changing, we know that sea level is going to rise. What do you want to invest in? Do you want to invest in protecting the existing cities, or do you want to prepare an alternative solution, like relocating people to, say, the place, using the same amount of money? Then it comes to an opportunity cost analysis. Personally, for a checklist, when I talk about flexible, is to understand that this is happening, and you live in coastal city, you need to consider moving as an option. or at least have a backup plan when you know you can go to a different place when the city is not as suitable as it is now.
True. Okay. Other thing is regarding like the outcome.
Mhm.
I guess like for people it's hard to visualize the impact of a 1/4 meter rising in the water levels, right?
Yeah.
Is there a way for you to kind of show picture-wise, illustrated-wise, the impact it will have on a daily basis?
I
it's
think-
just kind of an idea. Like you can see, like I know you had the illustration of the water rising and stuff like
Yeah.
that, but I think like it's so it doesn't really show really what's going to be the impact. Like that's kind of like a very up here, like you're kind of like, yes, okay, it could rise, but for example, if you see this picture, then you can say, all right, there will be impact. But I don't think like people will understand the real difficulty of this, like
Yeah.
the real problem of what really could happen if something like this would happen on a more regular basis.
Yeah, I think Venice. This picture is
Yeah.
in Venice, St. Marco Square. Venice is a perfect example for us to look at. Venice is sort of built at a sea level. During high tide is already flooded. I think one thing very important for us to understand is that water is always fluctuating. There are high tides and low tides. So with the sea level rise, it means that cities, including Shanghai, during high tide, would potentially be more exposed to flooding. And then the water may go away. But if we're talking about, 0.5 meter or meter rise in sea level, then Venice, what we see now, would be more permanent. There'll be water covering the city all year round. And it doesn't mean that we cannot live in those cities, but it's going to really change the way we live in those cities. Economic activities will change. Right now, Venice, a lot of people are just going there as a tourist. You can go there for 1 day, 2 days, enjoy the water, to look at what it is. But it's almost impossible to live there permanently. So that is something that we all need to factor in.
Okay.
Ken, may I ask whether the Venice, the sea level rising, falling afterwards? I heard the news about the big flood. Once the sea level rise, and then cause a big flood, and then it also falling afterwards. So it's not as normally happen.
Yeah, so this goes back to the idea that sea level is always changing, even throughout the day. There's high tide and low tide. The difference could be sometimes a few meters, especially when there's a storm, when strong wind, there will be just a lot more water. The sea level will be a lot higher. So what Venice is experiencing right now is that during high tide is already flooding, but with a continuous increase of sea level, that means we're going to see more of that. And at a certain point, when sort of the average level of the sea is over the city, then you're going to see continuous flooding, maybe in a few decades, maybe in a century. But right now, the city is flooded when there's high tide, and the water will go away when there's low tide.
Thank you.
I don't know if people are aware of this. So this is just something interesting. So my parents live on a farm. I come from farm life.
Mhm.
And being on a farm, we are very used to the weather and reading weather patterns for crops and everything, right? So in this couple of years, it's always interesting. Like people say, oh yes, like Chit Chat is just talking about the weather. But for us, it's actually a topic of conversation. So it's really interesting actually to see over the last couple of years how the weather has changed. And I always say, my parents will always talk about this is like worse than last year. Like this is the hottest summer we've ever had, or this is the coldest winter we've ever had. And the rain season is changing and stuff like that. So, for example, South Africa, we don't have a lot of natural disasters. I don't think we're close to the plates, but we're getting it more and more. Like the last
Yeah.
couple of years, we were having tornadoes. We've been having the rain. We had a lot of rain last couple of weeks, where Durban, one of the coastal cities, are like they're kind of a little bit in a jam. And this is something that's really odd for South Africa. And I remember there was this one news reporter that said, why don't they just leave? Like, why don't they just leave the city? But because South Africa, it's such a strange thing. People don't know how to handle it. So they didn't, because it's never happened before. So I guess that's something, well, for South Africa, at least, they need to start considering that more natural disasters are coming their way. Yeah. So it is changing a lot, and
Yeah.
it's interesting to see. For us, we can see how it really changes and how it affects us.
Oh, thank you for sharing your experience. I think that for me, I have experienced extreme climate situation as well. I was living in San Francisco for a few years, and during the last few years there was constant, regular wildfire, which affected a large part of California. I remember one day I woke up, the entire city went orange because of wildfire. And interestingly, I think when you look at the climate across the world, similar climate regions are experiencing similar extreme weather pattern. For example, in San Francisco, part of South Africa, and then a lot of the Mediterranean area, you have the Mediterranean temperature, Mediterranean climate. And oftentimes what we see is extreme heat, dry weather, drought that eventually cause to fire. While when I was showing you guys the first slide, when you look at Northern Europe, Canada, part of Canada, Eastern Australia, they have floods. So the way that we're going to experience climate change is always different. And yes, we cannot just pack up and move. That's why for the government to be implementing mitigation projects, infrastructure projects to alleviate the impact of extreme climate situation will be very important.
I saw, like, for example, Australia, like, because Australia is not that big compared to other countries and continents and stuff, right? But they're like really layered on this. Like, is it because of their where they are on continental plates or something? Because they have, like, I don't know if you remember, obviously you know, but they just seem to have it all. Like, they had a solid red zone, a solid yellow zone, a solid green zone. Like, why is that kind of Australia is so diverse in this?
Well, Australia as a continent is actually pretty big, and the really habitable place in Australia is really on its eastern coastline, and there's a patch of it on the west. That's where Perth is. In the middle of it, there's a huge desert. So from north to south, it has completely different climate pattern. And when you look at what's happening on the east, we see extreme situation. One year there's flood, there was just flood last year, and 2 years ago there was this huge fire right before the outbreak of COVID. So it's experiencing a lot of things together. Similarly, when you look at the US, it's also a big country where in the West you have fire, and then in New York and other places you have flood, tornadoes. So that's why, you know, it's a global issue. It's going to be experienced differently for everybody. But at the same time, for us, it's important to understand locally where we live, what kind of risk that we are exposed to.
Going to build my little greenhouse garden.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you very
I
much.
think, yeah, thank you. Well, I think we have Janine, I think I can get this back to you. Are you okay? Since that your screen is frozen.
Okay, let me use that other audio. Now you
Okay.
can hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear you.
You can is my best read this morning. I just want to say thank you very much, dear Ken, for the wonderful presentation. We had so many amazing questions. I hope, I don't know if you can see my screen. I was actually just sharing our next speaker on Wednesday. We're going to have Zoe. We had to change this speaker, unfortunately, because he will be on an airplane to another part of the world. But if you want to join for Wednesday morning motivation in Chinese, come join us. You can stay up to date in the WeChat groups. You can also connect with Ken in the WeChat groups. If you love what we're doing, why not donate? I would like to say thank you also to David and especially to Janneke for a very big donation last week. Thanks for supporting. We give 50% to the 1 Million Tree Project. So they build up, they grow trees, plant trees in Inner Mongolia, and the other 50% helps us cover our costs. So thank you for the support. And today is your last chance to get a pre-launch offer of host Sophia and my coaching cards. So you can scan the QR code to get yours. And yes, last but not least, we didn't mention this earlier, but if you're looking for furry partners in your life, if you're based in Shanghai, scan the QR code. These two baby boys, or baby girl and baby boy, Pepper and Bob, they're 10 months old and they're looking for a nice home. So yeah, and this is it for today. If you want to join our WeChat groups, just add me on WeChat and I'm happy to add you to the WeChat groups. Ken, thank you so much for your time, for your very interesting topic this morning. It was definitely special. And guys, you know, I love to say, what's that one activity, action that you can start implementing in your life, that you can start taking? Or maybe you can tell some other people in your private life, work life about it. Spread the word, because I think this is a topic we all need to take not advantage, but need to take care of. So yes, happy Monday, no matter where you are in the world right now, whether you're locked down like us or you are not, it doesn't matter. Take the advantages. It's a new day, new week. Don't make excuses, and happy Monday, everybody. And thanks so much, Ken.
Thank you for having me. Have a good week, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Good to see you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.